Thank you. Whoa.
Okay, I'm going.
Okay. Doesn't look like we could squeeze too many more people in this room. And let me say thank you to the many hundreds of people in the overflow room.
Got it.
Okay. We began this campaign about 3.5 months ago. And when we began this campaign, people were saying, well, you know, Bernie Sanders, an interesting guy, but, you know, it's kind of a fringy type candidate. I mean, no one takes seriously the idea that maybe, just maybe, we need a political revolution in America. Maybe, just maybe, something is wrong when almost all of the new income is going to the top 1%. Maybe, just maybe, something is wrong when we have the highest rate of childhood poverty of any major country and more people in jail than any other country. So all over the country, in New Hampshire and in Iowa, all over the country, thousands and thousands of people started coming out. A couple of weeks ago, we were on the West Coast. We had 15,000 people in Seattle, 28,000 people in Portland, Oregon. And we had 27,000 people in Los Angeles. So it seems to me that the ideas that we are talking about are not fringe ideas, they are the ideas that the American people support. This is a campaign on the move, and it's a campaign that's going to win here in South Carolina and all across the country. But the enthusiasm and the excitement for this campaign is not just large turnouts like we saw earlier today in Greenville and we're seeing here in Columbia. What it is that I think people also understand that there is something profoundly wrong when millionaires and billionaires today control our political system. Well, let me be very clear. I do not represent the billionaires' agenda. I do not want their money. We are not going to have any super PAC at all. We are raising money for this campaign in the very old-fashioned way, small contributions from some 400,000 Americans. Average contribution, $31.20. I'm proud of that. What this campaign is about is bringing people together with the understanding that if we do not allow ourselves to be divided, if we stand together as black and white and Hispanic, Native American, men and women, straight and gay, native born and immigrant, if we stand together, they may have all of the money, they may have all of the power, but we have the people, and when people stand together, we win. You know, wherever I go around the country, you know, media come up to me and they say, you know, we're really surprised. Why is there so much excitement? Why is there so much enthusiasm? Why are you moving up in the polls? And let me tell you what my answer is to them. My answer is that the American people are sick and tired with establishment politics. They are sick and tired with establishment economics. And frankly, they are sick and tired of establishment media. The people of our country fully understand that corporate greed, this never-ending greed of needing more and more and more, no matter how much they have, that corporate greed is destroying our economy. And they also understand, and I speak to you as the former chairman of the Senate Veterans Committee, the American people also understand that men and women throughout our history have put their lives on the line and sometimes lost their lives defending democracy, and that there is something profoundly wrong when billionaires are buying elections. That's not democracy. And the American people also understand that at a time when this country faces so many enormous problems, when we need so much serious discussion, that much of the corporate media will talk about everything in the world except the most important issues facing working Americans. Let me be as clear as I can be. This campaign is not about Bernie Sanders. It is not about Hillary Clinton. It is not about Donald Trump, Jeb Bush, or anyone else. This campaign is about you, your kids, your parents, and the future of this country. As someone who has run for office a number of times in my state of Vermont, I have never run a negative political ad in my life. Because I believe that what politics and a democracy is about is to take a hard look at the serious problems facing our country and propose ideas and let the American people discuss them. I think it's absurd for politicians to say, I'm great, I'm wonderful, everybody else is terrible. That's wrong. What we need is a serious discussion about the serious issues facing our country, and that's what this campaign is about. And our campaign is different from other campaigns, not only in terms of the fact that we have the most progressive vision, but more importantly, in how we are running this campaign. I believe, and let me be honest with you and tell you what no other candidate for president will tell you, that no matter who is elected president of the United States, no matter how good he or she may be, that person cannot address the enormous problems facing working families and the middle class because of the power of big money interest in this country. That is the truth, and it's an uncomfortable truth. So what I am calling for is not just your support to elect me as president. I am asking you to be part of a political revolution which transforms our country economically, politically, socially, and environmentally. And let me tell you what this political movement is about. Bernie! Thank you. I love you too. What this political movement is about is millions of people from coast to coast standing up and saying loudly and clearly, enough is enough. This great nation and our government belong to all of us, not just a handful of billionaires.
Don't tell me we can't provide a good healthcare system guaranteeing healthcare to all of our people. Don't tell me that we can't use technology to make sure that workers do not have to work 50 or 60 hours a week. Don't tell me that we can't have an excellent child care system and a great educational system in this country. Don't tell me that this great country and our young people cannot lead the world in transforming our energy system so the planet we leave to our kids and our grandchildren is one that is habitable. Don't tell me we can't do that. We can do that. But what we have to do to move forward is to take on the incredible greed and power of a handful of billionaire families who want it all. Honest to God, I cannot explain to you why a family like the Koch brothers, who are worth $85 billion, you might think that that is enough money. You might think that they're not quite worrying about feeding their families or their summer vacation. And yet, they are spending huge amounts of money to destroy Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, public education, the Environmental Protection Agency. Now, why they are motivated to do that, I think a psychiatrist would have to examine. I don't understand. No, I really don't. No, I'm being very serious here. You know, we all have friends who have problems with alcohol, right? We have friends who have problems with drugs. But I think what you're looking at now is a certain number of very wealthy and powerful people who have a problem with greed and power.
You bet.
You know, and it's an addiction. They need more and more. But again, I don't know why you need billions more. Right? And we have got to stand united. And when we do that, there is nothing that we as a people cannot accomplish. It embarrasses me, to tell you about what these other countries are doing for their people, and we're not doing it. But in order to do that, we do need a political revolution. Let me just simply tell you what that means. It means that you can't have elections as we did last November where 63% of the people don't vote, where 80% of young people don't vote. What we have to do is change our culture so that people understand that politics in a democratic society and involvement in the political process is what patriotism is about. So when people tell you, oh, you know, politics is all crap, why are you coming here on a beautiful afternoon to hear some senator from a state no one ever heard of? You know, why are you coming here? And you tell them because you're concerned about the future of this country. You want to hear ideas. And anyone who tells you that politics is not important, you ask them why the Koch brothers are going to spend $1 billion on this election. So if it's important for people who want to destroy Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, and federal aid to education, it is important for working families. So what I'm asking you to do is to help me make a political revolution in which we build a strong mass movement. I don't mind when wealthy people, the billionaires, come out against me. I kind of expect that. But I do get upset in hearing working people voting for candidates who are going to send their jobs abroad, who are going to take their kids off of health insurance, who are going to make it harder to send their kids to college. I know that there are divisive issues. I know not everybody in this room is pro-choice. And there are probably divisions on guns, and there are divisions on gay marriage and all that stuff. I understand that. Fine, in a democratic society we can disagree. Trust me, my wife and I disagree. And I hear it all the time. All right. But on economic issues, let's reach out to our brothers and our sisters and our co-workers and our neighbors and say, no, don't vote against your kids and your parents. Don't vote for people who want to destroy Social Security and send your job abroad. If we do that, if we involve millions of people in this campaign, man, we can create a country the likes of which no one has ever seen. That's our mission, and I look forward to working with you to make that happen. Thank you very much.
What does your Jewish heritage mean to you, and how does it inform your policy positions, if at all?
A good question. I'm proud to be Jewish, not particularly religious. And what the lesson that I learned as a little kid is understanding in a very deep way what politics is about. A guy named Adolf Hitler won an election in 1932. He won an election. And 50 million people died as a result of that election in World War II, including 6 million Jews. So what I learned as a little kid is that politics is in fact very important. Thank you. President Falwell and David, thank you very much for inviting my wife Jane and me to be with you this morning. We appreciate the invitation very much. And let me start off by acknowledging what I think all of you already know. And that is the views that many here at Liberty University have, and I, on a number of important issues are very, very different. I believe in women's rights and the right of a woman to control her own body. I believe in gay rights and gay marriage. Those are my views, and it is no secret. But I came here today because I believe from the bottom of my heart that it is vitally important for those of us who hold different views to be able to engage in a civil discourse. Too often in our country, and I think both sides bear responsibility for us, there is too much shouting at each other. There is too much making fun of each other. Now, in my, and I say this as somebody whose voice is hoarse because I have given dozens of speeches in the last few months, it is easy to go out and talk to people who agree with you. I was in Greensboro, North Carolina just last night. All right. We had 9,000 people out. Mostly they agreed with me. And tonight, we're going to be in Manassas and have thousands out, and they agree with me. That's not hard to do. And that's what politicians, by and large, do. We go out and we talk to people who agree with us. But it is harder but not less important for us to try and communicate with those who do not agree with us on every issue. And it is important to see where, if possible, and I do believe it's possible, we can find common grounds. Now, Liberty University is a religious school, obviously. And all of you are proud of that. You are a school which, as all of us in our own way, tries to understand the meaning of morality. What does it mean to live a moral life? And you try to understand in this very complicated modern world that we live in what the words of the Bible mean in today's society. You are a school which tries to teach its students how to behave with decency and with honesty, and how you can best relate to your fellow human beings, and I applaud you for trying to achieve those goals. Let me take a moment, or a few moments, to tell you what motivates me in the work that I do as a public servant, as a senator from the state of Vermont. And let me tell you that it goes without saying, I am far from being a perfect human being, but I am motivated by a vision which exists in all of the great religions, in Christianity and Judaism, in Islam and Buddhism and other religions. And that vision is so beautifully and clearly stated in Matthew 7:12. And it states, "So in everything do to others what you would have them do to you. For this sums up the law and the prophets." That is the golden rule. Do unto others what you would have them do to you. That is the golden rule, and it is not very complicated. Let me be frank, as I said a moment ago. I understand that the issues of abortion and gay marriage are issues that you feel very strongly about. We disagree on those issues. I get that. But let me respectfully suggest that there are other issues out there that are of enormous consequence to our country and, in fact, to the entire world, that maybe, just maybe, we do not disagree on. And maybe, just maybe, we can try to work together to resolve them.
As far as race inequality is concerned, this question from one of our students. If you were, sir, were elected president, what would you do to bring healing and resolution to the issue of racism in our country? We both want to see that go away. What steps would you begin to take if you were our leader in seeing that resolved?
That is an excellent question. I thank you for it. I would hope and I believe that every person in this room today understands that it is unacceptable to judge people, to discriminate against people based on the color of their skin.
Yes.
And I would also say that as a nation, the truth is that a nation which in many ways was created, and I'm sorry to have to say this, from way back on racist principles, that's a fact, we have come a long way as a nation. Now I know, my guess is that probably not everybody here is an admirer or a voter for Barack Obama. But the point is that in 2008, this country took a huge step forward, David, in voting for a candidate based on his ideas and not the color of his skin. We all know to what degree racism remains alive in this country. I cannot understand, I really can't, I think about it, I try to understand it, how a sick man can walk into a Bible study class, discuss the Bible, pray with people in the room, and then take out a gun and kill 9 of them because the color of their skins were different than his. And I cannot understand for the life of me how there can be hundreds of groups in this country whose sole reason for existence is to promote hatred. These are hate groups.
Right.
And they say, join us so we can hate African Americans or gays or Jews or immigrants or anybody that is different from us. I can't understand that. I think what we have got to do is when we see instances of racism, when we hear political leaders appealing to the worst elements of us by making racist attacks against people from another country or people whose color may be different than most of us, we have got to stand up and say, in America, you're not going to do that. Racism is unacceptable.
Yes, sir.
Well, let me just say this. The answer is, obviously, we have got to change our hearts.
Yes.
But everybody here should know, 50, 60, 70 years ago in this country,
Yes.
we had segregated schools and segregated restaurants. And it took a Supreme Court, it took Martin Luther King Jr., it took millions of people to man public policy which ended segregation.
That's right. Well, we know that you were in North Carolina last night. You're going to be in Manassas this afternoon. You continue to go from place to place, just meeting your staff. They're just incredibly hardworking people in this very fast pace where you and your wife are on the campaign trail with grandkids, and you're the liveliest 73-year-old I've ever met, sir. And how can we pray for you and your family? How can we be thinking of you? What can we, when we think of you and we see you on TV, what can we say? Bernie Sanders asked us to pray for him. He asked us to, what can we?
Well, David, thank you very much for that thought. I appreciate it from the bottom of my heart. But this is what I would like prayers to be for.
Yes, sir.
Not just for me. Far more significantly, are prayers for our country, prayers for how we bring our people together, prayers for how we can create in the wealthiest country in the history of the world a beautiful country, a country where all people have health care, where all kids who have the ability can go to college, where we have wiped out childhood poverty. Those are the prayers that I want to join with you in making.
Amen.
I think my message to you all today is a pretty simple one, and that is our country faces some enormous problems, and these problems are not going to be solved if people turn away from political struggle, if people throw up their hands in despair and say, I don't want to get involved, it's all crap. You are getting a great education here in Georgetown. And I hope very much you will use what you have learned here to fight to create a better world, and to follow in the traditions of so many people for so many years who have struggled to create a more democratic and just society. Let me take you now back to the 1937. And in his inaugural address, in the midst of the Great Depression, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt looked out at the nation in the midst of this terrible depression. And this is what he saw, and this is what he talked about in his inaugural. He saw tens of millions of people denied the basic necessities of life. He saw millions of families trying to live on incomes so meager that the pall of family disaster hung over them every single day. He saw millions of his fellow Americans denied education, recreation, and the opportunity to better their lot and the lot of their children. He saw millions lacking the means to buy the products they needed, and by their poverty, by their lack of disposable income, denying employment to many other millions. Because when you don't have money to spend, you're not creating jobs for other people. He saw 1/3 of a nation ill-housed, ill-clad, and ill-nourished. And he acted against the ferocious opposition of the ruling class of his day, people he called the economic royalists. Roosevelt implemented a series of programs that put millions of Americans back to work, took them out of dire poverty, and restored their faith in government. He redefined the relationship of the federal government to the people of our nation. He combated cynicism, fear, and despair. He reinvigorated democracy. He transformed our country, and that is exactly what we have to do today. And by the way, almost everything he proposed, almost every program, every idea he introduced was called socialist. I thought I would mention that just in passing. Social Security, which all of you know transformed life for senior citizens in this country, was defined by his opponents as socialist. The concept of the minimum wage, that workers had to be paid at least a certain amount of money for their labor, was seen as a radical intrusion into the marketplace and was described as socialist. Unemployment insurance, when you lose your job, you have something to fall back upon. Abolishing child labor, ending the fact that children of 8, 10, 12 years of age were working in factories or working in the fields. The 40-hour work week, collective bargaining, the rights of workers to engage in negotiations with a union, strong banking regulations, deposit insurance, and job programs that put millions of people to work were all described in one way or another as socialist. Yet, as you all know, all of these programs and many more have become the fabric of our nation and, in fact, the foundation of our middle class. 30 years later, after Roosevelt's speech in the 1960s. President Lyndon Johnson fought for Medicare and Medicaid to provide health care to millions of senior citizens and families with children, persons with disabilities, and some of the most vulnerable people in this country. Today, Medicare does not seem to be such a terribly radical idea to say that when somebody gets old, they should have medical insurance, but when it was proposed, once again, we heard right-wing forces describe these programs as socialistic and a threat to the American way of life. That was then, now is now. Today, in the year 2015, despite the Wall Street crash of 2008, which drove this country into the worst economic downturn since the Great Depression, the American people are clearly better off economically than they were in 1937. But here is a very hard truth that we must acknowledge, we must address, we must not sweep under the rug. And that is, despite a huge increase in technology, and I can remember back, I was mayor of the city of Burlington, Vermont. Anybody here from Vermont? Okay. And when I was mayor in the 1980s, a radical development took place. We got computers in City Hall. Okay? 1980s. Despite a huge increase in technology and worker productivity, meaning that almost every worker in America with that technology is producing a lot more than workers that came before. Despite major growth in our GDP and a huge increase in the global economy, tens of millions of American families continue today to lack the basic necessities of life, while millions more struggle every day to provide a minimal standard of living for their families. And I hope none of you will turn your back on that reality. And the truth is, and again, this is a truth we must put on the table. Yes, we are better off today economically than we were 7 years ago when Bush left office. But the other truth is that for the last 40 years under Republican leadership and Democratic leadership, the great middle class of our country has been in decline, and faith in our political system is now extremely low. New technology, increased worker productivity, people working longer hours for lower wages, faith in our political system now extremely low. In my state of Vermont and all over this country, it is absolutely not uncommon to see people working 2 jobs or 3 jobs to cobble together the income and the health care they and their families need. In fact, Americans work longer hours than do the people of any other industrialized country. But despite the fact that our people are working so hard, I go around the country and I see a lot of working people, and you can see the stress and exhaustion on their faces. They're working crazy hours. Husbands hardly see wives. People don't have the quality time for their kids because they're working so hard just to bring in the income to survive. And despite all of that, despite our people working so hard, 58% of all new income generated today is going to the top 1%. Today in America, as the middle class continues to disappear, median family income is $4,100 less than it was in 1999. The median male worker made over $700 less than he did 42 years ago in inflation adjusted for dollars. Do you know why people are angry? They are angry because they are working terribly hard. And yet in real inflation adjusted for dollars, they are earning less. And they're looking all over and they say, what's happening? Why is that? But it's not just men. Last year, the median female worker earned more than $1,000 less than she did in 2007, and 58% of all new income goes to the top 1%. Today in America, the wealthiest country in the history of the world, that's what we are today, more than half of older workers have zero retirement savings. Think about that. You're 50, 55 years of age, and you're thinking, all right, how am I going to retire? But because my wages have gone down, I have zero in the bank for retirement. And at the same time, all over America, you got millions of seniors and people with disabilities trying to survive on $12,000 or $13,000 a year Social Security. From Vermont to California, older workers are scared to death, and they are saying, how am I going to retire with dignity? And I want all of you, you can get your calculators out, not now, when you leave here. Do some arithmetic. And try to put yourself in the place of a senior citizen in my state of Vermont, where it gets cold in the winter, trying to survive on $13,000 a year. And you tell me how you are going to pay for the food that you need, heat your home, and buy the medicine that you need. And you know what? You can't do it. Today in America, nearly 47 million people are living in poverty, and over 20% of our children, including 36% of African American kids, are living in poverty, the highest rate of childhood poverty of almost any nation on earth. And what I want you to think about is, why is it in the wealthiest country in the history of the world, where we're seeing a proliferation of millionaires and billionaires, we have the highest rate of childhood poverty of almost any major country on earth? Today in America, 29 million Americans have no health insurance, and even more are underinsured with outrageously high co-payments and deductibles. In other words, people do have insurance, but I talk to people every day. They got a $5,000 deductible, $8,000 deductible. They can't go to the doctor when they need. And then on top of that, for a wide variety of reasons, our people pay the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. And doctors tell me all of the time, we prescribe something, a medicine for our patients, they can't afford to fill that medicine, that prescription. 1 out of 5 Americans cannot afford to fill the prescriptions their doctors write. What insanity is that? Today in America, youth unemployment and underemployment is over 35%. For African American kids, it is over 50%. Meanwhile, we have more people in jail than any other country. China, communist authoritarian country, 4 times our size, we have more people in jail than China, and countless lives are being destroyed as we spend $80 billion a year locking up our fellow Americans. The bottom line is that today in America, we not only have massive wealth and income inequality, but a power structure built around that inequality, which protects those who have the money. Today, a handful of super wealthy campaign contributors have enormous influence over the political process, while their lobbyists determine much of what goes on in Congress. And any member of the United States House or Senate who is prepared to tell you the truth will tell you exactly that. So let me take this opportunity to define for you, simply and straightforwardly, what democratic socialism means to me. It means building on what Franklin Delano Roosevelt said when he fought for guaranteed economic rights for all Americans. And it builds on what Martin Luther King Jr. said in 1968 when he stated, and I quote, "This country has socialism for the rich and rugged individualism for the poor," end of quote.
Going to close the unproductive tax loopholes that have allowed some of the truly wealthy to avoid paying their fair share. In theory, some of those loopholes were understandable, but in practice, they sometimes made it possible for millionaires to pay nothing, while a bus driver was paying 10% of his salary, and that's crazy.
Furthermore, not a whole lot of people know this, 1 out of 4 profitable corporations pay 0 in taxes. These guys are putting their money in the Cayman Islands, Bermuda, other tax havens. So I have the radical idea that as we deal with deficit reduction, maybe we don't cut Social Security and benefits for disabled veterans and Medicare and Medicaid and education. Maybe we plug these loopholes and ask these guys to stop paying their fair share of taxes.
Social Security, let's lay it to rest once and for all. I told you never would I do such a thing. But I tell you also now, Social Security has nothing to do with the deficit. Social Security is totally funded by the payroll tax levied on employer and employee. If you reduce the outgo of Social Security, that money would not go into the general fund to reduce a deficit. It would go into the Social Security Trust Fund. So Social Security has nothing to do with balancing a budget or erasing or lowering the deficit.
Today, Social Security has a surplus in the trust fund of $2.76 trillion. And then we hear the argument, well, you know, we have a large deficit. Social Security is one of the causes of our deficit and our national debt, and that is absolutely inaccurate. Social Security has not contributed 1 nickel to our deficit or our national debt, because Social Security, as every worker in America knows, is independently funded through payroll tax contributions from workers and employers, 6.2% from each, and it does not receive funding from the federal treasury. Social Security is not an investment program. You can invest money on Wall Street, sometimes you do well. You can invest money on Wall Street, sometimes you lose your shirt. Social Security is a social insurance program. It has never failed one American in 79 years. That is a pretty good record.
California has a system, unlike that of many other states, in which when you go in to buy a gun, you put down your money and you buy the gun, but you don't get to pick up the gun for several days, because investigation is then made to make sure that you're not a felon, that you don't have a record of bad conduct, or that you are mental illness or anything, and then you can come back and get your gun. And I do not believe in taking away the right of the citizen to own guns for sporting, for hunting and so forth, or for home defense. But I do believe that an AK-47, a machine gun, is not a sporting weapon or needed for defense at all.
I come from a state that has virtually no gun control. But the people of my state understand, I think pretty clearly, that guns in Vermont are not the same thing as guns in Chicago or guns in Los Angeles. In our state, guns are used for hunting. In Chicago, they're used for kids in gangs killing other kids, or people shooting at police officers, shooting down innocent people. You know, folks who do not like guns is fine. But we have millions of people who are gun owners in this country. 99.9% of those people obey the law. I want to see real serious debate and action on guns. but it is not going to take place if we simply have extreme positions on both sides. I think I can bring us to the middle. What the Koch brothers want to do is destroy Social Security, because Social Security is a federal government program that has been enormously successful. The Koch brothers are funding think tanks and other organizations which are spreading an enormous amount of disinformation about Social Security. Raising the age of retirement is to ask people who are banging nails or waitresses or so many blue-collar jobs out there that you got to keep working until you're 70 years of age. That's just really unfair. Second of all, we want to give the younger generation an opportunity to get out into the workforce. The Koch brothers fund organizations, and you have economists and political scientists working there. And they are very, very good in getting on television.
Raising the retirement age.
I would increase the retirement age.
You will probably have to increase the retirement age.
We're probably going to have to raise the retirement age.
And people will not know they represent an organization which is heavily funded by corporate interests. They are very effective in getting their positions out into the media.
Should Congress raise the retirement age?
If you raise the retirement age.
Well, raise the retirement age.
Let's consider the options. Let's raise the age.
Raising the retirement age to 69.
At the same time, the Koch brothers are putting huge amounts of money into campaign contributions.
Very modest increases in the retirement age.
And eventually getting the retirement age to 70 is a step that needs to be taken.
The age on Social Security will have to go up.
So you have an echo chamber which starts repeating a lot of misinformation.
Raising the retirement age, reducing benefits for higher.
The Koch brothers are funding study after study which suggests to people that Social Security is going bankrupt. Social Security is not going broke. Social Security has a $2.6 trillion surplus.
The program is actuarially bankrupt.
Social Security and Medicare, they are going to go broke.
The real risk is Social Security running out of money.
Social Security going bankrupt.
Social Security already bankrupt.
Social Security is going bankrupt.
The system will be bankrupt.
Bankrupt federal programs like Social Security.
Social Security is going bankrupt.
Social Security is already going bankrupt.
The Koch brothers want to privatize Social Security to invest your retirement funds on Wall Street. And you may lose all of your retirement savings when you get old.
Real security is based on personal accounts with real assets.
I like the idea of personal accounts.
The option of investing 1/3 of their Social Security payroll taxes into personal retirement accounts.
The Koch brothers' job is to do everything they can to dismember government in general. And if you could destroy Social Security, you will have gone a long way forward in that effort. You have a major political party that happens to control, unfortunately, the House and the Senate, which is rejecting science on the issue of climate. Now, it's interesting. I want you to think about it. I deal with these guys every day. I'm on the Health Education Committee. They don't reject science when it comes to cancer research. You know, they look at the scientific evidence, and they may end up wanting to spend less money than I do, but they don't say, hey, these scientists are crazy. They don't reject science when it comes to Alzheimer's research or diabetes research. But on this issue, they categorically, not all of them, almost all of them, reject science. Why? I heard a magical 5-letter word, money. And this gets you right back to campaign finance reform. If some Republican candidate for president tomorrow gets up and says, you know, I just talked to some scientists, I just read some magazine articles, climate change is real and I'm worried about what's going to happen to my kids and my grandchildren, we got to transform our energy system. On that day, that Republican candidate would lose the support of the Koch brothers, who make most of their money through fossil fuel, and big energy companies. and that candidate would be primaried in the Republican primary. That's the simple fact. That's why Republicans do not speak out on climate change. Pretty sad state of affairs. And what our job is to tell them that in this moment when we have got to be aggressive, they should start worrying more about their children and grandchildren than their campaign contributors. Now, in terms of ISIS, in terms of national security, huge issue. Everybody understands that we're dealing with a barbaric organization that, at least in my view, has got to be crushed. The question is, what is the most effective way to do it? There are some out there who say, well, let's just send in the troops. Well, my feeling is that if the United States acts unilaterally, as we did in Iraq, and get involved in perpetual warfare in the Middle East, that will be a disaster. The way to destroy ISIS is putting together an international coalition in which the Muslim troops are the boots on the ground. This is what King Abdullah of Jordan is saying, where the large and powerful nations like the United States, UK, France, Russia are there to provide the air support and the tactical support that that coalition needs. That's my view.
With the growing Islamophobia in this country, if you look at all the Republican candidates, in order to feed into their constituents, they're talking about Islamophobia and are constantly bashing Muslims in the media. Ben Carson, Donald Trump, the biggest bigots. As a Muslim student, as an American Muslim student who aspires to change this world, Thank you. As an American Muslim student who aspires to change the world, currently majoring in international conflict analysis and resolution major, and I hope to be a human rights attorney. Hearing the rhetoric that's going on in the media makes me sick. Because I, as an individual, I'm constantly trying to raise awareness and make sure that everyone is treated equally in this country. So, to the next president of the United States, what do you think about that?
This is what I think. This is what I think. Let me be very personal here, if I might. I'm Jewish. My father's family died in concentration camps. I will do everything that I can to rid this country of the ugly stain of racism which has existed for far too many years. And let me tell you something. What racism is about is many, many things. It is pent-up hatred that is lashing out at people in uncontrollable and stupid ways, but it is something very different than that. For many years in this country, you have had politicians, and I'm old enough to know this, who played black off against white. So they told white workers who are earning pennies an hour, they said, hey, you think you're in trouble, but you're better off than the blacks who can't drink at a water fountain or go to your school. And they told straight people, well, you think you got problems, that you're better off than those gay people, right? And they told men against women. We played one group off against another. The rich got richer, everybody else is fighting with each other. Our job is to build a nation in which we all stand together as one people. And you are right. There is a lot of anger being generated and hatred being generated against Muslims in this country. That's absolutely correct. There is hatred being generated against immigrants in this country. And if we stand for anything, we have got to stand together and end all forms of racism, and I will lead that effort as President of the United States. All across this country, there is a significant alienation from the political process. People look to Washington and they throw their hands up and they say, what in God's name is going on there? Why aren't our senators and our congressmen paying attention to our needs? Why aren't we developing a rational foreign policy rather than talking again about getting involved in a quagmire in the Middle East, which could lead to perpetual warfare? So let me conclude just by saying this. The problems that we face as a nation are indeed very, very serious. I've talked on some. There's a lot we haven't even touched upon. But by and large, all of these problems were caused by bad human decisions. And if we come together, if we stand together, if we do not allow ourselves to be divided up by race, by whether we're gay or whether we're straight, whether we're born in America, we weren't born in America, whether we're a male or a female, if we stand together and if we focus on how we can create sane foreign policy, how we can rebuild the middle class, how we can combat climate change, how we can create a nation in which we end racism and homophobia. If we are prepared to do that, if you, as young people, are prepared to engage in the political process, I have no doubt that there is nothing that together we cannot accomplish. Thank you all very much.